Hey, what's up guys? So in this video, we're going to take a look at the latest firmware updates available for the Uniden R7. Now, firmware version 1.46 was released recently, and this has added some new features like a third K-block specifically for your Mazda CX-5s. There's also 5 more custom K-blocks available now. There's some GPS lockout changes, there's Gatso support that's been added, etc. Then shortly thereafter, Uniden also released firmware version 1.47, which includes all the same stuff plus some additional controls for how the automatic GPS lockouts function. And originally I was thinking of doing one video for both firmware updates covering all the different changes, but a lot of the auto lockout stuff in 1.47 is kind of complex to actually get into, so I figured that might be better to have in its own dedicated video. Additionally, after people started running 1.47, they started getting some GPS errors on their detectors too. And since then, Uniden's actually removed 1.47 off the website. And so for the time being, at the time of shooting this video, 1.46 is the current version. And so in this video, we're going to go over 1.46. And then in the future, when there's a new firmware update available, if they re-release like the auto lockout changes, when they fix the GPS stuff, etc., we'll do a second video going over future changes. And so in this video, let's go over all the changes that we have here for the current firmware version 1.46. Now, the first new feature to talk about is the alert temporary volume. It's a setting that you can turn on and off here in the detector. And the idea is when you're driving around with your detector at any point, you can always, of course, just hit the mute button to mute the alert, right? Now, what if you want to maybe reduce the volume of just this current alert, like while the alert is still going on, but you still maybe want to like keep hearing the alert as it's alerting? Well, this is where the alert temporary volume option comes into play. I'm going to demo this by first triggering a K-band alert. And we can now kind of temporarily reduce the volume of this alert while it's going on. However, if we get a new alert, like let's say a Ka-band alert, that one's going to be alerting here at full volume, not at the temporary volume. And then we'll just go ahead and mute everything here like we would do before. And as the name implies, this is also a temporary thing. So like after, the mute latch expires, the signal's been gone for a little while. If that signal or a new signal pops up, that is also going to return at the full volume. So this is just a way if you want to like just temporarily reduce the volume of the current alert that you're getting, but you still want to hear it and not have it like drop down to your, full mute or auto muted level. You've got a little bit more control now as far as how you're muting the current alert while it is going on. Now, the next new option here is called auto mute level. And this is going to kind of go hand in hand with the auto mute functionality, which is the idea where the detector is going to alert normally for a few seconds, and then you can set it to automatically reduce its volume for you after several seconds. This is different than the temporary alert one. This is kind of the automatic volume drop. So you can, of course, turn that on and off just like we had before. But what's new now is this auto mute level option. And you're basically going to be adjusting the signal strength here of the detector for when the auto mute goes away and the signal is going to resume alerting at full volume. And the reason why you might want to use this is, let's say, the signal auto mutes after a couple seconds, it gets quieter, but as you're getting closer and closer to the source, the signal strength is going to ramp up. You can set it to like, if you get to a certain distance or well, maybe a certain signal strength where it's getting really strong, go ahead and unmute the detector and resume alerting at full volume because, well, I'm now really close to the source and I really need to make sure that I can hear that alert. So this setting, it's called the auto mute level option, but I think maybe a better name for it would be the auto unmute level, kind of the level where the detector like unmutes itself and goes back to full volume. And again, you can go in here and adjust the levels as far as when the detector would unmute. And so that's what this setting here is for. It's the auto kind of like unmute level. Now, the next new menu option here is going to be for the rear balance option. We have the ability to adjust the rear sensitivity of the detector for all 3 bands. And if we go into here, you can see we can adjust the rear sensitivity, say to like, I don't know, 60%, for example. You can adjust Ka-band independently, and you can also adjust rear X-band. Now, this is different than if you have the detector set up in advanced mode here, where you can adjust the sensitivity of the overall detector itself. And when you go into the menu options here for advanced mode, you can set X-band here, for example, 100%. K-band I've got currently set to 70%, and Ka-band 100%. These options here in advanced mode is for the detector's overall sensitivity. If we go into the rear balance option, this is going to be dialing back the sensitivity even further, above and beyond what we have currently set here in the advanced mode. This is also going to apply, of course, if you're running in like highway or city mode, which does its own kind of controls for the detector sensitivity too. So this rear sensitivity is just basically looking at the detector's overall sensitivity and then either having the rear sensitivity run at the same level if you've got it 100%, or if you start dialing it back, it's going to drop the rear sensitivity even further than what you've got the detector's overall sensitivity set to. Now, the next new option here is a new K-block, and this might actually be my favorite feature here on the detector. You see, this one that's pre-built here is specifically designed for your Mazda CX-5s. Those are really common sources of false alerts. They typically cause your detector to false around 24.123 to 24.124 or so. And so now there's actually a K-block built in specifically to help knock out those. You've still got the same K-blocks as before, so you're like 24.199-ish ones, you know, Hondas, Acuras, Chryslers, etc. You've got the 24.169-ish range, and now we have this third one here for your Mazda CX-5s. Now it's worth noting that you've got a lot of individual controls here for exactly how this functions. So we can go in here and adjust, like, let's go back, you know, do we want it to basically mute when it's at below a certain signal strength? We can go in and adjust, I got a lot of options here. We can just disable this one. We can have it only apply to weak signals, or maybe like max sensitivity. You can just have it mute signals, but still display them. So we've got a lot of controls as far as how that K-block is going to function. Now, something else to point out is you can also adjust the direction that this is going to apply to. You can have it only apply to the front, only apply to the rear, or it says side, but it's a little confusing. This actually means front and rear and side, so really all directions. You also have the ability to go in and adjust the exact frequency ranges, and I would actually suggest maybe tightening this up a little bit to like 24.123 to 24.124. That's typically where you're going to see it. And this frequency range can also be really commonly used for police K-band guns, so I would probably go a little bit tighter here than the default. On top of that, we've also now got 5 custom K-block options as well. So now if, you know, 3 isn't enough and you want to knock out some additional frequency ranges, you've got 5 more for a total of up to 8 K-blocks. And these custom K-blocks, you can customize the exact same way with adjusting, you know, like your signal strength threshold, the direction that it applies to, as well as the frequency ranges. Now, a cool trick is if you come across like a BSM car, you know, while you're driving around, you don't have to necessarily go in there and like manually customize the K-block. You can actually just create one on the fly when the detector is alerting to a BSM false. And the way you're going to do that is when that signal pops up, you're just going to press and hold this mark button here on the side of the detector for 1.5 seconds or so, and that's going to go ahead and create a K-block around the signal that you're currently seeing. And I'll go ahead and demo that real quick. I've got a Bushnell that transmits at like 24.162, and we'll use this to create a K-block around, kind of pretending that this is a car nearby with a blind spot transmitter. The detector's alerting. I'm going to press and hold mark here, and then boom, it's now created a K-block here for that frequency range. And now when you go take a look at the menu options, you can see K-User 1 has a custom K-block for strong signals, because I'm right next to the gun, you know, all directions, and basically the signal that I was seeing plus minus 5 megahertz. Now this one that I've created is actually very similar to like this one that's built in here to the detector. I was actually picking something up a little bit under 24.166, which is why I now have a new one here, which is kind of in a very similar frequency range. If I wanted, I could always go in here and maybe, let's see, which one is it? This one I could like, you know, tighten up this frequency range if I want it, do something like this. I'm like, okay, well I now have another one in that range, so maybe this one will apply to like 24.164 or whatever. You can always go in here and customize it further, but that's just like a quick shortcut to creating a lot of these custom K-blocks on the fly. Next, we've got some improvements for the manual GPS lockouts, specifically if there's multiple signals present at the same time and you want to actually choose which signal you want to have manually locked out. This can be especially useful if, let's say, you're driving around in like a shopping center parking lot, for example, and there's a lot of door openers. Previously, the detector would just kind of lock out everything, which you may or may not want, but now we actually have the control and the ability to choose which signal the detector locks out. And in this example here, driving past a grocery store, you can see multiple signals present on the detector. And then when I double press the mute button on the side of the detector to create a manual lockout, it's going to let me actually cycle through the different signals that it's seeing currently and choose which one I want to lock out. And when I get to the signal that I want to lock out, I can either just let the detector time out and choose that signal, or I can select that one by manually pressing the mute button and holding it for 2 seconds. And then if you try it again and there's one locked out signal and one new signal, it's going to go ahead and lock out the new signal. And in practice, I found that locking out signals multiple times like this, well, it can start to get a little bit tedious because now you're not creating one lockout for like the entire area. You're now locking out each individual signal. I do wish there was the ability to still just like nuke everything when you're in a shopping center, but it looks like we no longer have that option now that it's set up to actually choose which individual signal you're going to be locking out. It's also worth keeping in mind that if you go take a look at the memory quota, we have a limited number of manual GPS lockouts. You can max it out up to 1,750 manual lockouts, and you can see currently I've got 26 manual lockouts created. And so while on one hand, it could be nice to have the additional control as far as choosing which signal you want, I do still wish we had the ability to just like have one lockout that could fully nuke everything like we had before. And speaking of the GPS lockouts, it does seem like Uniden is continuing to do some work here on their end as far as the GPS lockout algorithm. And firmware version 1.47 that I mentioned earlier that's since been pulled off of Uniden's website, this does have some additional controls here for the auto mute mem option to go in here and kind of fine tune exactly how the automatic GPS lockouts work. Again, it's nice, I guess, maybe having these options here in development. It might be a little bit much to actually go in here and start granularly adjusting exactly the GPS lockout algorithm built into the detector. I'm really hopeful that Uniden continues to do some work here with the detector to really kind of get all this stuff set up for us. That way we don't necessarily have to go like this deep into all of the lockout controls, but nevertheless, I'm glad to see that they're continuing to work on the GPS lockout algorithm, and I hope that over time with more firmware updates, they'll finally get to the point where these lockouts actually work reliably. And then coming back to 1.46, the next change to talk about is Gatso detection. It's been added here on the R7. And then when you have it enabled, there's also some Gatso specific menu options that are available here as well. Now, as far as how well this works, I don't know yet. It's something that still, of course, needs to be tested. I don't have any Gatso here in my area. I've been driving around for the past couple days with this turned on. I don't think gotten any Gatso falses, which is pretty nice because typically Unidens do definitely false on Gatso. But of course, for those of you guys who do have Gatso in your area, I would love to see you guys maybe actually take the time to test it so we could all see exactly how well the R7 works against that specific photo radar gun. And speaking of photo radar, Unidens also adjust the filtering tolerance for the MultaRadar photo radar guns. And according to Uniden, adjustive filtering for MRCD and MRCT should make the detector behave more like the R8, which is good. This also needs to be tested as well so we can see how well it works. But again, according to Uniden, this should improve the performance against MultaRadar, but it might actually come at the expense of increased false alerts. In my experience driving around with it over the past maybe week or so, I'm still getting kind of the same MRCD falses that I do before. Again, they haven't improved the filtering here. It might actually false more. They're basically improving the performance and detection range against the MRCD. Now, as far as the next option, you know how on top of the detector we've got the volume up and down buttons that allow us to adjust the main volume of the detector? Well, if you go into the menu, there's now also a new option right here where we can adjust the main volume as well. Exact same thing like what we saw before, but now you can do it here through the menu as well, not just having to go back to the idle screen and adjusting it there. Now, the next new option has to do with the scan icon. It's not a feature that I typically use, but the idea is when you have it turned on, it's going to go ahead and show you this like blinking heart on the display right there. And before it used to always be red like this, and that was actually independent of the display color. So if I go in now, just for example, and I'll maybe set the display to blue like this, now that blinking heart is also going to be blue, effectively just matching the display color. Again, it used to be red regardless of the display color. Now it's going to match whatever the display color is. And so that's a look as far as all the new changes and improvements here with 1.46. As far as my overall thoughts here with this update, I think the main improvement that I'm really happy to see is the additional K notches and the ones specifically available here for the Mazda CX-5s. You could deal with some of those by like enabling MRCD in the detector, but then you also get a lot of MRCD falses. You don't really want that if you're like in an area like me where you don't have MRCD in the first place. Then you're having to deal with some additional MRCD filtering options to try and get rid of the MRCD falses that you've introduced while trying to knock out the CX-5s. So now we've got a better approach, which is just to create like a K block specifically for the Mazda CX-5s, and that's also very helpful because the R7 does not have Bluetooth like the R4 and the R8. So we can't kind of add that same functionality in using an app on our phone. So now we have the ability to do that directly in the detector without having to do any like goofy workarounds with the MRCD and whatnot. As far as all the different volume control stuff, that's cool, I guess. Maybe my favorite one is like the auto unmute option, which again is called like the auto mute level option. So as you get like really close to a source, if you want the detector to like crank back up to full volume and like really get your attention, in addition to like the ramp up being really, rapid, of course, you've got that option here as well. As far as the GPS lockout stuff with like choosing which signal you want to lock out, I think that was a cool idea in practice, but without the idea of just being able to like mute everything when you're in a shopping center with a ton of door openers everywhere, I think that would actually get kind of annoying, and I'd probably just fall back to letting auto lockouts lock out everything. But with the R7, you can keep driving past stuff and like it won't over time always automatically lock out stuff either. So then you kind of fall back to resorting to the manual lockouts, and now you've got to do this multiple times because, well, one lockout can't nuke everything, and you've got a limited amount of lockouts available, and so now you're going to be using up more lockouts. Like, I'm still just not a huge fan of all the lockout stuff here. I think just overall the algorithm itself still needs work. Again, they're working on 1.47, so it looks like we're going to have more control, but I really want to see Uniden just kind of nail this so that we don't have to figure all this stuff out ourselves. I'd want to be able to just like get a detector, stick it in the windshield, the built-in auto lockout algorithm with the default settings, everything just works out of the box. We're still not at that point, but I'm glad to see that at least they're continuing to work on it. We've been asking about this for a while now, so I'm glad that they're actually starting to like put some time into this, but I do still think that the lockouts need work. And then as far as comparing this firmware update to Mytharu's third-party firmware, 1.50 International, between the two, I think I actually still prefer his firmware update, 1.50. You see, his firmware update actually has some automatic GPS lockout improvements to make your auto lockouts work better. There's some additional security features that are very helpful in case your detector gets stolen. Plus, it adds some automatic sensitivity options to vary the detector sensitivity based on speed. The R8 has that feature as well, but with the R7, it's actually more customizable than what we've got on the R8. There's some additional RDD immunity features, so if you wanted to make the detector even more stealth and undetectable to the Spectre, it's got that capability as well. So between those, I mean, I'm going to put the international firmware back on my detector as well, now that I'm done like shooting this video and whatnot, because I still think that's a better overall option. If you want that firmware option, I'll link to that down in the description as well, in addition to like where you can order the detector, where you can grab the latest firmware updates from Uniden, etc. And speaking of updating, the way you do that's pretty straightforward. Just head on over to Uniden's website and grab their update software. You can plug the detector into the computer. It should recognize it and automatically update for you. That said, two key things. It's a Uniden detector, and again, a lot of people are having issues with just the update process in general. If that happens to you as well, there is a good resource on the forum with a thread that's dedicated to like, here's the different tips and tricks to getting your detector updated, and also where you can post if you need any sort of like customer service type stuff or tech support. Additionally, something else that I've noticed is there's a newer version of the GPS database with all the red light cameras and speed cameras available on Uniden's website. The one that comes packaged with the latest R7 firmware updates is actually an older version of the GPS database. So what you can do is actually go ahead and update your detector with the latest firmware, and then manually grab the latest red light camera database off of Uniden's website and separately load that into your detector as well. Obviously, it would be nice if like the latest firmware came pre-bundled with the latest red light camera GPS database, but that's not currently the case. And so if that feature is important to you, you encounter a lot of red light cameras and whatnot, just keep in mind that you're going to want to grab the latest update, which the time I'm shooting this video, again, it's like newer than what comes actually bundled with the firmware update itself. And then finally, as far as any updates above and beyond that, like 1.47, that again has since been pulled off of Uniden's website. More videos to come as they release, or I guess re-release new firmware updates and maybe make any changes accordingly, like fixing some of the GPS errors that we saw with 1.47. So anyways, with all that said, that's a look here as far as 1.46. Available now on Uniden's website. If you have any questions, head on down to the comment area below or join us over on the forums where we're all discussing these updates as well. And so, yeah, with that said, that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys are doing well, and I'll see you in the next one.